Thomas Walker pulled his thin coat tighter as the cold December wind blew through the streets of Millfield. For 6 months now, he had been without work. The factory where he had spent 15 years of his life had closed its doors, leaving him and hundreds of others jobless. Each morning, he would wake up hoping for good news, but each day ended with the same heavy feeling in his chest. His savings were getting smaller, and the bills kept coming. Today was no different as he walked through the town, his hands deep in his pockets, trying to stay warm. At the end of the street stood the community center. Thomas had passed by it many times but had never gone inside. Something about needing help from others didn't sit right with him. He had always been the one others came to for help, not the other way around. But things were different now. His cupboards at home were nearly empty, and the thought of another night with nothing but tea for dinner made his stomach hurt with hunger and shame. Just this once, he told himself as he stopped outside the building. Through the windows, he could see people inside, some sitting at tables, others moving about with boxes and bags. It looked warm in there, at least. For 5 full minutes, Thomas stood outside, gathering his courage. Twice he turned to leave, and twice he stopped himself. Finally, with a deep breath that clouded in the cold air, he reached for the door handle. The warmth hit him first as he stepped inside, then the smell of coffee and something baking. It was busy but not too crowded. Some people were filling out forms, while others chatted in small groups. It looked nothing like the sad, desperate place he had imagined. "Hello there," a voice said, making Thomas jump slightly. A woman with kind eyes and gray hair streaked with silver was looking at him with a gentle smile. "First time visiting us?" Thomas could only nod, his throat suddenly tight. "I'm Mary," she said, extending her hand. "I run this place. Why don't you come in properly and get warm? We've got hot tea and coffee over there." Thomas shook her hand, noticing how firm her grip was despite her age. "Thomas," he managed to say. "Thomas Walker." Mary didn't ask why he was there or what he needed. Instead, she simply guided him to a table where a pot of tea waited. "Help yourself," she said. "When you're ready, I can show you around or explain what we do here." Thomas poured himself a cup of tea, warming his hands around it. From his seat, he watched the activity in the center. An older man was helping a young mother fill out some papers. 2 teenagers were sorting through boxes of canned food. A girl who couldn't be more than 20 was teaching an elderly man how to use a mobile phone. No one looked at him with pity or judgment. No one seemed to care that Thomas Walker, who had never asked for help in his life, was sitting there needing it now. Mary returned after a while and sat across from him. "Feeling a bit warmer now?" Thomas nodded. "Thank you for the tea." "We're more than just a food bank, you know," Mary said, somehow sensing what had brought him here. "We're a community. Everyone here has something to give and something they need. That's how it works." For the first time in months, Thomas felt something other than worry and shame. He couldn't quite name it, not hope, not yet, but perhaps the first step toward it. "The food distribution starts in half an hour," Mary continued. "But before that, I could use some help moving those boxes. The young man who usually does it called in sick today. Would you mind?" Thomas understood what she was doing, offering him a chance to give before he received. It was a small thing, but it mattered. He stood up, removing his coat. "I'd be happy to help." As he followed Mary to the storage room, Thomas felt his shoulders straighten just a bit. Maybe this wasn't the end of his story. Maybe it was just a difficult chapter. Thomas returned to the community center the following week. This time, he didn't hesitate at the door. When he walked in, Mary looked up from her desk and her face brightened with recognition. "Thomas. Good to see you again." She waved him over. "How was the food parcel? Did it help?" Thomas nodded, feeling less shame than he expected. "It did. Thank you." The bag of groceries had lasted him nearly the whole week. He had made simple meals, stretching everything as far as he could. "I was wondering," Thomas said, clearing his throat, "if there's anything I can do to help around here? I don't like just taking." Mary smiled as if she had been waiting for him to ask. Actually, we need someone to sort donations on Thursdays. Just 2 hours of your time. Would that work for you? Thomas agreed without hesitation. What else did he have to do? His days were filled with job applications that went nowhere and worry that led to sleepless nights. The following Thursday, Thomas arrived at the center at exactly 10 o'clock. Mary introduced him to Oliver, a man with gray hair and glasses who spoke with the clear voice of someone who had spent years in a classroom. Retired teacher, Oliver confirmed when Thomas asked. 35 years teaching history to teenagers who couldn't care less about the past. He chuckled. Now I sort beans and pasta twice a week. Much more satisfying. They worked side by side, checking expiration dates and organizing food items on shelves. Oliver told stories that made the time pass quickly. He spoke of his travels, his students over the years, and the changes he had seen in the town. Another volunteer joined them later. Her name was Emma, a university student with bright blue hair and a laugh that filled the room. She was studying social work and volunteered between classes. The shelf is wobbly, Emma pointed out as they worked. It nearly collapsed on me last week. Thomas examined it. I can fix that. Do you have any tools? Mary found him a toolbox in a back room. It was old and missing several key items, but Thomas made do with what was available. Within 15 minutes, he had stabilized the shelf. That's impressive, Oliver said, watching Thomas work. You've got good hands. Builder, were you? Factory foreman, Thomas replied, putting the tools away. 15 years at Westbrook Manufacturing. Until they closed. I heard about that place shutting down, Oliver nodded sympathetically. Hard blow for the town. Thomas appreciated that Oliver didn't offer empty reassurances or pity. Just acknowledgement of the difficulty. As the weeks passed, Thursday mornings became the highlight of Thomas's week. The routine gave his days structure again. He began to know the other volunteers and even some of the regular visitors to the center. One day, Thomas arrived to find the old heater making a terrible noise. Mary was frantically calling repair companies, but none could come until the following week. Let me take a look, Thomas offered. I used to maintain all the equipment at the factory. The heater was old but not complicated. Thomas found the problem: a loose connection and a worn-out fan belt. He managed to fix the connection and rig a temporary solution for the belt. You just saved us at least £200, Mary said, relief evident in her voice. That money can go to helping people instead. Thomas felt a surge of pride, something he hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't just that he had fixed the heater, it was that his skills still mattered. He could still contribute something valuable. As January turned to February, Thomas found himself volunteering not just on Thursdays but also on Monday afternoons. He became the unofficial handyman of the center, fixing whatever needed repair. Each task, no matter how small, helped rebuild his sense of purpose. One afternoon, as Thomas was repairing a broken chair, Mary approached him with a cup of tea. You know, she said casually, several people have asked if we could offer some basic home repair workshops. Many can't afford to call professionals for simple fixes. Thomas looked up from his work. Workshops? You mean teaching people? Yes, Mary nodded. Nothing fancy. Just simple things: how to fix a leaky tap, unclog drains, patch walls. Things you clearly know how to do. Thomas felt a flutter of anxiety. I'm not sure I'd be any good at teaching. Mary smiled. You won't know until you try. Think about it? As Thomas walked home that evening, he did think about it. The idea terrified him. Speaking in front of people had never been his strong point. But something about the possibility also excited him. It would be a new challenge, a chance to pass on knowledge that might genuinely help others. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a new beginning. The winter grew colder, and snow piled high on the streets of Millfield. Thomas continued his job search without success. Each rejection letter felt like another small defeat. But his time at the community center had become a bright spot in his life, something he looked forward to twice a week. One Thursday afternoon, as the snow fell heavily outside, Mary found Thomas fixing a broken door handle in the center's kitchen. "Have you thought more about the workshop idea?" she asked, handing him a screwdriver. Thomas tightened the last screw before answering. "I'm not sure I'm the right person, Mary. I've never taught anyone anything." "That's not true," Mary countered. "I've seen you showing Emma how to use tools properly. You taught Oliver how to fix his glasses last week. You're already teaching, Thomas, just not in a formal way." Thomas put the screwdriver down, considering her words. He had enjoyed those moments, explaining how things worked and seeing the understanding dawn on someone's face. "Many of our visitors can't afford to call professionals when things break at home," Mary continued. "Simple repairs cost a fortune these days. Your knowledge could really help people." That night in his small flat, Thomas couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about Mary's suggestion. The idea of standing in front of a group made his stomach twist with anxiety. What if he couldn't explain things clearly? What if people asked questions he couldn't answer? But another voice in his head wondered, what if he could actually help? What if he could teach others to be more self-sufficient, the way his father had taught him? By morning, he had made his decision. It terrified him, but he would try. The following Tuesday, Thomas carefully wrote out a sign, "Basic Home Repairs with Thomas every Saturday at 10 a.m. His hand shook slightly as he pinned it to the community center's notice board. He expected nothing to come of it. Who would want to learn from an unemployed factory worker? When he returned on Thursday, he was shocked to see 3 names on the sign-up sheet. By the end of the day, there were 5. And when Saturday approached, 8 people had registered for his first workshop. What should I even talk about? Thomas asked Mary in a panic on Friday. Start simple, she advised. Maybe how to fix a dripping tap? Almost everyone has that problem at some point. So Thomas spent Friday evening gathering tools and materials. He found an old tap in a second-hand shop and practiced explaining how to replace washers and seals. He wrote notes, then rewrote them, trying to make the instructions as clear as possible. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Thomas got to the center an hour early to set up, his heart pounding with nervousness. People began arriving just before 10, a mix of ages and backgrounds. There was Robert, a young single father who lived in the council flats, Diane, an elderly woman who had recently lost her husband, and several others Thomas recognized from the food bank. Good morning, Thomas began, his voice a bit shaky. Thank you for coming. Today we're going to learn how to fix a dripping tap. His hands trembled as he demonstrated the first steps. He dropped a washer, then fumbled with a wrench. His face grew hot with embarrassment. This had been a mistake. These people deserved a proper teacher, not someone who could barely hold a tool steady because of nerves. But when he looked up, no one seemed bothered by his mistakes. They were watching intently, some taking notes. Could you show that last bit again? Asked Robert. The part about testing the washer? Thomas took a deep breath and demonstrated once more, this time with steadier hands. As the workshop continued, he found himself relaxing. He began to enjoy explaining the process, the feeling of sharing knowledge he had taken for granted for years. When the hour ended, Thomas expected everyone to leave quickly. Instead, they gathered around the table, asking questions and examining the parts more closely. Will you show us how to fix other things? Diane asked. My kitchen drawer has been stuck for months. My shower keeps going hot and cold, added another participant. Thomas felt a warm glow of satisfaction. If you're interested, I could do another session next week. Definitely, Robert nodded. This is brilliant. Do you know what a plumber would charge just to look at my tap? As the group finally dispersed, Mary approached Thomas with a cup of tea. Well, she asked. How do you feel? Thomas considered the question. Despite his nervousness and mistakes, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of purpose, of being valuable to others. I think, he said slowly, I might be good at this. With practice. Mary smiled. I knew you would be. Sometimes the hardest part is just beginning. Thomas prepared more carefully for his second workshop. He created simple handouts with pictures and clear instructions. He practiced his explanations several times in front of his bathroom mirror. Despite this preparation, he still felt nervous as Saturday approached. This time, 11 people came to learn how to fix a stuck drawer and cabinet hinges. Thomas noticed some familiar faces from the first session plus a few new ones. Robert, the single father, had brought his neighbor along. "Last week's lesson saved me £50, Robert announced to the group. "My kitchen tap works perfectly now." Thomas felt a rush of pride at these words. As he began demonstrating how to fix a stuck drawer, he found his voice was steadier than before. When he made a small mistake, he simply corrected himself and moved on. No one seemed to mind. The workshop lasted longer than planned because everyone wanted to try the techniques themselves. Thomas moved around the room, offering advice and encouragement. He noticed that some people picked up the skills quickly while others needed more guidance. He found himself adapting his explanations for different people, something that came surprisingly naturally to him. As weeks passed, the workshops grew. Word spread through the community that practical help was available at the center on Saturday mornings. From 8 participants, the group expanded to 15, then 20. Thomas had to start running 2 sessions to accommodate everyone. Mary found a small budget to buy basic tools and supplies. Thomas organized these carefully and created take-home kits for common problems so people could make repairs in their own homes. One cold March morning, a middle-aged man in a smart coat attended the workshop. He sat quietly at the back, watching Thomas demonstrate how to fix a simple electrical problem with a lamp. After the session ended, he approached Thomas. "I'm James Wilson," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm from the town council's community development program." Thomas shook his hand, wondering if there was some problem with his workshops. "Mary invited me to observe today," James explained. "We're very impressed with what you've developed here. The council has funding for community education programs, and we'd be interested in supporting this work." Thomas was stunned. "Supporting how?" "For starters, we could provide proper tools and materials. Perhaps even a small payment for your time as an instructor." That evening, Mary handed Thomas an envelope after everyone had left. "The center can offer you a stipend for your teaching," she said. "It isn't much, but it's something." Thomas opened the envelope to find a check, his first income in nearly 9 months. The amount was small, but it represented something powerful, recognition of his value. "There's more," Mary continued, sitting down across from him. "The council is creating a new position, a trades coordinator for their community skills program. They want someone to expand what you're doing here to other centers across town." James asked if you would be interested. Thomas felt as if the floor had shifted beneath him. "Me? But I'm not qualified for something like that." Mary gave him a look that was both kind and firm. "You've created a program from nothing. You've taught dozens of people valuable skills. You understand both the technical aspects and how to explain them clearly. Who could be more qualified?" The following week, Thomas found himself in an interview at the council offices. He wore his best shirt, freshly ironed, and the tie he had worn to his daughter's wedding years ago. The panel asked him questions about his experience, his vision for the program, and how he would make it accessible to different communities. To his surprise, Thomas answered confidently. He spoke about practical skills as a form of independence and dignity. He explained how teaching people to maintain their own homes not only saved them money but also gave them confidence that extended to other areas of their lives. As he left the interview, Thomas realized something important had changed. He was no longer simply looking for any job to pay the bills. He had found something he truly cared about, something that used not just his technical skills but also this new talent for teaching he had discovered. 1 week later, the phone call came. The job was his if he wanted it. The salary wasn't large, but it was stable. The position came with training opportunities and the chance to develop new programs across the town. That night, Thomas sat at his kitchen table and looked at the job offer letter. 9 months ago, he had been a factory foreman. The closure had seemed like the end of everything he knew. He could never have imagined that losing his job would lead him here to something new that filled him with purpose. Tomorrow, he would tell Mary the news. Tomorrow, he would begin planning for this new chapter. But tonight, he simply sat with the feeling of possibility that had replaced the heavy weight of uncertainty. Spring arrived in Millfield, bringing warmer days and new growth. Thomas walked to the community center with a lighter step than he had in months. Today was not just another Thursday, it was his first official day as the trades program coordinator for the town council. The small office they had given him was nothing special, just a converted storage room with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a computer. But to Thomas, it felt like a fresh start. He had hung a few photographs on the wall, one of the first workshop group, proudly holding their repair kits, and another of Mary and the center volunteers. Thomas spent the morning organizing his new workspace and reviewing the plans he had created for expanding the workshop program to 3 other community centers in town. The council had been impressed with his practical approach and his ability to explain complex skills in simple ways. At lunchtime, Mary knocked on his door with a sandwich and tea. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Being on the other side of the desk?" Thomas smiled. "Strange." "Good strange, but still strange. 6 months ago I was signing on at the job center. Now I have my own office." "You earned it," Mary said firmly. "This program wouldn't exist without you." After lunch, Thomas was scheduled to meet his first apprentice, a young person the job center had referred to the program. Thomas had insisted that the role go to someone who was struggling to find work, just as he had been. At exactly 1 o'clock, a young man appeared in the doorway. He looked about 20, with nervous eyes and hands that couldn't seem to stay still. "Mr. Walker?" The young man's voice was quiet. "I'm James Phillips. The job center sent me. I'm supposed to be your apprentice?" Thomas recognized the uncertainty in James's eyes, the same look he had worn on his first visit to the center months ago. "Come in, James," Thomas said warmly, offering him a chair. "And it's just Thomas, not Mr. Walker." James sat down, his eyes darting around the small office. "I don't know much about repairs," he admitted. "I worked at the supermarket before they cut back staff." "That's all right," Thomas assured him. "When I started teaching these workshops, I was nervous too. But here's the first thing you should know: everyone who walks through those doors has something valuable to offer. Even if they don't know it yet." Thomas spent the afternoon showing James around the center, explaining the workshop program, and introducing him to Mary and the others. He showed James the toolkits they had assembled and the instruction guides he had created. "Next week, we'll start training you on basic repairs," Thomas explained. "Then you'll assist me in the workshops. Eventually, you might run some sessions yourself." "You think I could do that?" James asked, doubt clear in his voice. "I know you can," Thomas replied. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined standing in front of a group teaching anything. Now look at me." Later that afternoon, an elderly couple came to the center looking for help. Their kitchen chair had broken, and they couldn't afford a new one. Thomas brought out his tools and showed James how to assess the damage. "The joints have come loose," Thomas explained. "We can fix this with some wood glue and clamps. Want to try?" Under Thomas's guidance, James carefully applied glue to the joints and secured them with clamps. His hands shook at first, but as he focused on the task, they grew steadier. While they waited for the glue to dry, Thomas helped a young mother who had come in with questions about a leaking pipe in her bathroom. He explained what she needed to do and wrote down step-by-step instructions. From across the room, Thomas noticed that James had begun explaining to the elderly couple how to tighten other loose furniture at home. He was showing them techniques Thomas had just taught him, using simple words and patient demonstrations. As the day ended and they closed up the center, Thomas felt a deep satisfaction. Life hadn't returned to what it was before the factory closed, it had become something entirely new and unexpected. He thought about the long winter months of worry and doubt, the days when he had felt useless and forgotten. That time had been necessary, in its way. It had led him here, to work that mattered and to the discovery of strengths he hadn't known he possessed. Walking home through the town, Thomas noticed signs of spring everywhere: buds on trees, flowers pushing through soil, people sitting outside cafes enjoying the late afternoon sun. After every winter, no matter how harsh or long, spring always returned. Nature never gave up, and now, neither would he. The journey wasn't over, there would be challenges ahead with the new program, budgets to manage, and people to convince of its value. But Thomas faced the future with something he had lost and found again: hope. He had learned that strength wasn't about never needing help, it was about finding the courage to both receive it and give it. In the heart of Millfield, a community had reminded one man that new beginnings could be found in the most unexpected places.